Hello there and welcome to our end of day wrap up at ADIPEC 2021, and it is the end of day 2. And what a very, very busy 2 days we have had. So much going on, and here we are going to have a look at it. And I want to quickly welcome to join us here. Arthur Hanna is with us from World Energy Council, and also Christoph Ruhl, renowned economist and many other accolades, who's going to be able to help us in terms of make sense of all of what we've been doing in the last couple of days. So it's been a busy day, but one of the key areas, and gentlemen, this morning we kicked off in the main hall to really talking about, COP26 and what happened. Arthur, bring us up to date in terms of what you really felt was the focus. And again, it's ADIPEC, it's just after COP26. What were you hearing? And in the corridors, what are you hearing?
Well, I think the first thing I heard was that actually COP26 has acted as a bit of a catalyst for new thinking, a catalyst that recognizing that the net zero, the reduction of emissions agenda is here, it's real. You see it all around the halls here. It's amazing. Everyone is talking about the actions that they're taking. But there's a recognition that more will be needed. And to do that, what we're hearing is that more collaboration will be required by all of the participants in the energy value chain. The ecosystem is a much overused word, but as we move towards COP27 and COP28, well, I think what COP26 has done is said we as an ecosystem need to work together so that we change the way in which we operate and we move on this journey together rapidly over the course of the next number of years.
Yeah, I think there was definitely that sense of urgency, but also I think, the fact that there really wasn't a great representation from, well, definitely energy producers perhaps at COP, and the big CEOs were maybe missing. This is now their platform post-COP to have a conversation. What do you think?
It's a bit more than that even, so I recognize what I recognize the same what Arthur just said, recognition that this energy transition is here to stay, but then in the wake of that recognition I also realize there's an increased sort of confidence in a way that one has to manage that very carefully. And you heard, for example, the Secretary General of OPEC saying this is not about replacing one fuel with another. You heard voices from developing countries in the geopolitical context saying we have a lot of oil under the ground and we're not going to leave it under the ground. So there is some self-confidence from the producer side also kicking in here. And ultimately what it is about recognizing that this transition is for real, and then becoming sort of more concrete about it and saying this is not just going to be the replacement of old fossil fuel with new stuff. This is going to be a very long and difficult process where you try to combine the existing energy system and grow something new out of it.
One of the other big topics on the agenda, of course, today too, was really looking at geopolitics. And this was something, let me stay with you, Christoph, on this one, because a good look at this in terms of what's happening with regards to the energy transition, with production, all of that, and how it's impacting, how we operate in the world. What did you take from that?
There's a dose of realism which has to come from the industry rather than from anybody else. That realism centers around the two poles of a world which is poor and growing in terms of population and hopefully of incomes, which is going to need more energy. And the fact that the modern renewables, so to take wind and solar and geothermal and biofuels together, are only 4.5%. So you have a huge and complicated fossil fuel-based energy system, and then you have the need, which now everybody recognizes, it has to be transformed, it has to be decarbonized, and you have the industry saying, it's not going to be that easy, and suddenly trying to get back in a more serious level than ever before into this conversation of how are we going to do it.
And from you, Arthur, what did you take? And it's a conversation we have to have too, that's it.
Yeah, I think it's a conversation of two components. And what I mean by that is that there's an OECD conversation on the geopolitics, but there's also a non-OECD. So I was privileged enough to be in a number of sessions where the African states were being represented. And I think, there was a real passion with those individuals representing those states that they need a voice. They need a voice in this geopolitical discussion as we go forward. And there's a view that if we take the continent of Africa, there are 900 people that are still living in energy poverty. And so geopolitics takes on a very different complexion when that voice is being heard and when that voice is being actioned. And I think as we think about geopolitics going forward, we really need to be listening to the developing nations in a way that perhaps we haven't done so far. And I know that was one of the disappointments to a degree of COP26 in terms of how those voices have been heard. I think geopolitics will need to reflect that as we go forward.
And again, at the the OPEC session, we had the launch of the World Oil Outlook, and this is something now that we're doing, we have the OPEC session, so to speak, at every ADIPEC, and, the full team from the research department was here with Mr. Barkindo too. But again, talking about the fact that we really need to pay attention to this and pay a lot of attention to it. And it reflected also in a wonderful session that I was talking with two key players about electric vehicles. And again, they're not really worried about electrical vehicles, in places in Africa. They'd be very happy with any vehicle right now. And while it's nice to be electrifying tuk-tuks, some people can't even afford a tuk-tuk. So we're at that stage. And also, I don't think areas in Africa are too worried about hydrogen right now. Hydrogen and gas, the big conversation was there. And are we getting to hydrogen? Is this where we have to go just because it's where the conversation is leading right now? What do you think?
So this to me is the biggest surprise of day 2. The really enormous confidence into hydrogen being the next big thing. So we had a session where we were supposed to debate the pros and cons of hydrogen. By accident, both of the presenters or debaters were actually skeptical of hydrogen being the next very big thing, and told so to the audience. We're not going to have this debate. So in a way, it was us against the audience. Before the debate started, the audience was 70% voted in favor of hydrogen being the next big thing. That's against the panelists. After the debate was finished, they voted with 80% in favor of the same thing. So we had some egg on our face. That's what I mean, is a supreme confidence in hydrogen playing a big role in the solution of the energy transition.
And again,
too much of it.
But is it the solution? It can't be.
No, I think one of the things that we've heard, and it was the Barkindo comment that you mentioned earlier, is that there's no one solution to this energy transition. And in one of the sessions, I think was entitled "Gas versus Hydrogen." It's not gas versus hydrogen; it's gas and hydrogen. I think one of the interesting aspects in some of the sessions I attended was that yes, hydrogen is recognised as a future fuel. Hydrogen is here today in some component, but there are an enormous number of challenges still in the way for us to leverage the hydrogen potential of the future. There are issues associated with regulation. There are issues associated with legacy infrastructure and the need to change that. There are issues associated even with the certification of what actually do we mean by green hydrogen because of the different interpretations. So yes, I think we come away optimistic that we have moved from that old statement of gas is a fuel of the future and will always be a fuel of the future, which is the way in which we perhaps, Christoph and myself have talked about it since we've been in the industry a long time. I think we now have changed to, yes, we are convinced gas will play a part in the future energy system. But to get there, there's a lot of basic change that needs to happen, whether it's regulation, infrastructure, investment, and also the skills needed to be able to incorporate this into our value chains.
And staying with that, investment, this was something you talked about as well, and the costs associated. How much attention are people really paying to that, do you think? Or is it just the conversation that has to be had because it's the one that people want to hear?
There is a problem, the world used to be a very simple place. So the idea was if fossil fuels are very expensive, that's good for the energy transition because then renewables can compete. Now, with energy prices going through the roof everywhere as a result partially of lower investment, people are waking up to the fact that you actually need a functioning fossil fuel energy system in order to start the energy transition. You need energy security first, and then you can start the energy transition. If the lights go out, there will be no transition. So that's gradually sinking in, and that means that the enormity of the investment cost associated with it have just doubled because it's now the old system plus the new one, and not the simple either or. Just like Arthur said, it's not replacement of one with the other. The world is more complicated than that. This is something the industry knows why it's hard, and this is something which you hear everywhere. But the extent to which it's outside of industry conferences into the public discourse remains to be seen. The COP was very successful in putting other things on the agenda, and that explains partially the reaction which we are seeing here.
And just talking to people in the corridors here, when I know you're very busy with sessions and that, but occasionally when you're talking to colleagues here, is there a sense of optimism here that we can kind of get back to business and that realism in a way that is maybe creeping in? What do you think?
No, absolutely. I think it's been one of the great things for any of us being here over the last 2 days is that, as Christoph mentioned in his opening remarks, is that we have an industry that's confident, an industry that recognizes its challenges. It's not denying the challenges, but also it's an industry that will build upon its resilience, culture and heritage to make the changes that are needed as we go forward. And I think we've seen that when you walk around the halls here or you're part of the sessions. We're talking about solutions to problems. In each of the sessions we are articulating ways in which the industry needs to respond. We don't want to be seen as the problem. We want to be seen as part of the solution. And I think it's that part that has come through over the last 2 days, certainly for me.
And again, I'm hearing that in many of the sessions too, whereby producers and ministers and people are actually saying those very words, that we can be part of the solution, and this industry, the expertise, the knowledge, all of that, and indeed the money that's there as well. When some other investors are maybe pulling back, there is some cash not quite on the table, but it's available in this industry as well. And for a broader investment for the future, I think people are saying, look to us, we can actually sort this.
Yeah, I would even go a step further. So to some extent, it's less lip service than it used to be the last 5-6 years. It's recognition. Houston, we have a problem, we are on it. And with everything which follows from there is, what do we need for investment? Where does the money come from? And these kind of debates. That's a healthy state to be in. And it's also sort of much more forward-looking state. It's much less on the back foot than it was the last few meetings here.
And it's nice that it's quietened down a little bit here, because if we were here earlier, we wouldn't have been able to do this. It was so busy. I'm surprised it's still so busy late into the day. Can you feel the energy that people are coming back here? I think even, pre-COVID, the last time we had an event, I don't know if it was this busy, but it's exceptionally busy.
No, it's exceptionally busy, but there are lots of things we need to get on with. I think, there is this pent-up energy, excuse the pun, in terms of what we need to be doing. People want to be moving to solutions. And I think the other aspect that's come through, and we see it actually around here, is the collaboration agenda. In other words, none of the players here can do this on their own. Governments can't do this on, ministers can't do this on, oil companies can't do this on, service providers can't do it on their own. They need to be working with each other. So we're going late into the night here, mainly because there are so many bilateral meetings that are taking place to try and solve against the challenges that the industry face. And it's just great to be part of that in terms of feeding off that energy.
And again, in terms of, I think, the ministers and the CEOs, the representation from actually around the world, that has come here to really look at this issue, particularly when it perhaps didn't get the attention that maybe it should have got at COP. There is so much going on. What do you think, Christopher?
I think it was actually very healthy that it didn't get the attention at COP. So what we are seeing now is a reaction, and it's the reaction of somebody who has been to some extent being called out. So, guys, you say you have a problem, so what are you going to do about it? And maybe COVID was a healthy break to get collect our thoughts. And people, of course, want to go back to work, and now they're going back to work at a real problem with a real mission, and that's different from 2 years ago.
And we have lots more, 2 days to go, so I'll be keeping an eye and checking in with you gentlemen from time to time to hopefully help me out when I miss a session, and see if we can all get around and see what's going on here. This has been day 2 at ADIPEC 2021, and again, it's been an absolute delight to have Arthur Hanna back here in the hot seat with me, and Christoph Ruhl. Thank you both so much, and thanks for your focus, your insight, and indeed your analysis of what's going on here. So stay with ADIPEC. We'll be back with plenty of more analysis as we close 2 more days of ADIPEC 2021. I hope you enjoy our sessions.